And so here's our reading of traveling on this three-lane system, but traveling with one lane closed. The blue line running across this chart is the norm for our national economy over many recent years. And the norm says our economy normally is running at 3.1% real GDP growth, but we're not there. We're at 2.4. And so we've lost 1% of the growth rate. That's the closed lane. Now the difficulty is we've only been above that blue line one time in recent years. Just once did we get above the blue line. Now there's a long, long story associated with all of this, and we won't delve into the long story. The real question for us always is, where are we at the margin? What can we say about tomorrow? Now we can learn from the past, and sometimes that helps us to make a better statement about tomorrow. But what can we say about the prospects? And as we look at this line, I look for optimism everywhere I can when I'm examining economic data, and so I'm thankful that that line seems to be pointed north. But it may turn down next quarter. But in any case, you can see where we are and where we would like to be. Now, as we delve a little bit deeper, we can look at a sort of report card on what real GDP growth has been like per capita. When I say the economy is producing real wealth, new wealth at the rate of 2.4%, that's for the entire economy, counting all of the people that are in it. But if our economy is being filled constantly with more people, and it is, then we have to ask, well, what is the GDP growth per capita? Because obviously one way to have more GDP growth is just to have more people and employed. And if they're producing the way people have always produced, just more people will get us more real GDP. If they're producing at a higher rate, that makes GDP get even better. And so if productivity goes up and you get more people, you get more GDP for two reasons. And so now we're putting it in per capita terms, and so I ask you to look at decades. Back the decade of the 60s, it was 3.14. That's the old norm. The next decade is falling. It's 2.11. It stays in the 2+ range. And when we get to the most recent decade, it's 0.66 per capita. That's pretty pitiful. Now, we know that included in that is the Great Recession. Included in that number is the effects of the Great Recession. And so the next entry, I show you what it was like before the Great Recession hit us. It was 1.99 on a per capita basis. And so this gives us a reading in a sense of not only we're on a highway with one lane closed, but for some reason we're not able to produce wealth the way we once did on per capita terms. And that sort of begs for a diagnosis as we think about that very pitiful number. One way to diagnose the problem is to look at real GDP growth. That's the yellow brick road in the chart. To look at real GDP growth and as a potential, and then to look at what it really is. That's the white line. Potential GDP growth is a term that is based on an analysis that says, let's assume that the economy is operating at a normal level of unemployment. Well, now, right now, our unemployment rate is 7.6%. And the normal rate of unemployment is 5.5%. And so a statistician can look at GDP growth rates in the past and says, well, now I'm going to assume that we have 5.5% unemployment, and then I can announce what real GDP potential would be. That's the yellow brick road. Now you see, we fell off the yellow brick road. There's the Great Recession. But as you see, that white line is running almost parallel. Once again, you're seeing the closed lane. It's not turning up. It's not heading back. It's running parallel. Now, sadly, I would say, it's not turning back. And so there's our gap. Caught up in the gap are lots of unemployed people, lots of firms that still have not reopened, still have bankruptcies, but at a decreasing rate because things are getting better. So my optimistic twist on this would be to predict that that white line is going to start heading north this year and next, as though that gap is going to be closed, but notice it has a long way to go.